I traveled a lot growing up and then in my 20s and 30s, and I thought one day, what would it be like to travel for not only a year at a time, but perhaps years at a time? Because in America, you might get 2 weeks off. If you're lucky, you might manage to scrape a month together, very rarely. So I basically sold everything that I owned, and I got on the road for 3.5 years. And I wanted to have a narrative around the story, not just to travel, but where am I going and why am I going there? So I decided to divide it into 3 different years. The first year, I had a stranger choose 12 countries, and I spent a month in each country that that stranger chose. The second year, I spent a year alone in the desert because I was curious about solitude. And then the third year was the Good in America, where I drove around the country. So this picture right here is from Africa. One of the countries that this man picked was Mauritania. And for me, what was interesting about that was I felt like I knew a lot about the world, and I didn't really know where Mauritania was. You know, I sort of conflated it with Mauritius, which is in the Indian Ocean, and I was surprised to learn that it's one of the largest countries in West Africa. And so, the 12 countries that he chose in the first year that I went to, in the order that I did them, were Bhutan, Papua New Guinea, Australia, Cambodia, Namibia, Mauritania, Germany, Finland, Brazil, Ecuador, El Salvador, and Haiti. And this picture.
How much time would you spend in each place?
A month.
You spent a month there.
1 month, 12 countries.
And somebody would pick the next place.
No, he picked all 12 countries.
Okay, well, got it.
So the story behind that is I knew that I wanted someone to choose the 12 countries, but I didn't know who that choice was going to be. So to add further narrative to that, I figured I'd go to one of the world's most famous cities at a time that was numerologically significant. So I flew to Jerusalem on the summer solstice, and basically a half-blind beggar circled 12 numbers out of 180 numbers I had on the list. And when I got back to the hotel, each of those numbers corresponded to a country, and those were the 12 countries that I went to.
Morons. Anyone else hear that? That's awesome.
I love it.
But what was cool about that was allowing chance itself to have some
A lot of trust there.
dictation in what you're doing. And not only that, when you make choices, because of course I've been to some of these countries that he chose, and there are some countries that I did not want to go to, because I'm figuring, hey, I have a year of my life to donate to traveling. Why don't I just go to places that interest me? But I think it's important for chance to be involved because it gets you out of your habit patterns. And it forces you to make choices and see places that you would not have otherwise seen. Because I can still always go to the places I want to go to. And it turned out to be an amazing experience in terms of opening me up to experiences I would have never imagined that I had. And the other lesson from that in the early phase was that I knew if I was going to follow through with this, that I had to stick very specifically to the plan, because I knew myself, if I was in any way dishonest, I would know. And I decided that, and I was just like, you know what, I'm going to do this to the letter. Now, I knew the why of where I was going that first year, but I didn't know, I knew the destinations, but I didn't know the why. So I remember sitting there, I remember where we sat was in this crazy Jewish cemetery outside the walls of Jerusalem. And I remember there was a rusty key on the ground, one of those little skeleton keys that you used in the old doors. And so I thought, oh, I know where I'm going, but why am I going to these places? And I thought, okay, so maybe what I'll do is I'll give a key out to some individual in each country that inspired me the most, or helped me the most, or was in some way the most amazing person that I came across on that journey. So then I had my quest. I was going to deliver 12 keys around the world to people who I felt deserved it, and I knew the 12 countries I was going to. So I told my friends and family I was going to disappear for 2 to 5 years, and they wouldn't hear from me. And I just basically said, don't die, I won't die, you know, I'll be back one day.
Seems soon enough.
Yeah, and so I delivered a key. I flew, the 2 countries that weren't on the list that I wanted to go to were India and China. So I flew to China, and this young man who rode up on a cyclo basically I just said, hey, I need you to choose 6 keys for me. So he took me to these antique stores behind Tiananmen Square, and those 6 keys cost me about $1,000 from the antique store. And then I went to Calcutta, India, and an old man who drove a taxi, I told him I needed 6 keys, and he spent about 3 hours in these piles of rusty keys near Mother Teresa's tomb, and managed to get 6 keys that he felt were important. They asked me, so what are these keys for? I said, these are going to give good luck to the people around the world that I deliver them to. And when I gave the keys to these people, I would say, this key has been traveling the world to find you, and this key is going to bring you good luck for the rest of your life. So that was a quest, but when I was in these countries, I had that quest, but I also thought, I want to take the temperature of the world at this time, a man traveling in 2012. I want to see as much as I can. So each country, not only would I go to the waterfalls and do the activities that I could find in those countries, but I'd also do a give back. So I taught English to orphans in Cambodia. I hiked medical supplies up into the mountains of Haiti. I worked with orphans that had AIDS in Namibia. And within just that trip, there were so many lessons of traveling with a purpose, doing a give back, letting chance have some influence on your decisions. And traveling alone, as you said, traveling with others, it's great, but you're bringing a filter with you. And you're concerned about, oh, are they having fun, you know? And
if they, where are we going to go together to eat? Or...
And if things get rough, it's very easy for you both just to say, let's just go to a hotel. But when you're alone, you can push yourself through it, and that's where the real magic of experience happens. And as you said, your senses are very heightened. They have to be almost, because there are dangers and you need to be careful. And you're also storing memories inside yourself so that you can tell your friends when you get back, because you realize you're the only repository of those memories. You don't have a friend that you can say, hey, what happened? What was it that guy's name? There's nobody there to answer that. So you have to remember. The memories are so indelible for me that really over those 3 years, I can look back at this moment in time, on this day, on this month. If I thought about it a little bit, I could practically tell you what I was doing on each of those 3 days, every day of the year that corresponded to those 3 years. You know, you get back to civilization, and I can't even remember what I did 2 weeks ago. You know, I have to think about what I did for Halloween last year. And you realize that life is made up of memories, and in order to have memories that you remember, you have to have a texture. You have to choose to have texture in your life. And that texture is by doing things that are different. And that texture, in consequence, inspires other people to do those things and makes a big impact on both your life and theirs. And then you can also share those things together.
Wow. Obviously, those 3 years had a huge, profound change and impact in your life, right?
Yeah.
So,
and they're so different, because a year alone in the desert, I was stationary.
Where were you? So where were you?
I decided I was looking at the Atacama Desert in the Gobi, and I was looking at the Namib. But the purpose of the journey was really just to have solitude. And I chose the deserts of the American Southwest because I was familiar with them.
From Albuquerque originally?
Yeah, from Albuquerque. And I decided that if I was going to be in a desert, I might as well be in a beautiful desert. So I drove into Monument Valley, and I found an indigenous family that let me use a hogan up on the mesa about 14 miles in. It's just a mud dwelling, traditional mud dwelling. And they said, okay, well, you know, if you want to be alone up there, we have a flock of sheep that needs to be tended. So I ended up sort of inadvertently being a shepherd for about 5 months. And I would see people twice a month when I go down for supplies or to get water, because there's no water. And that ended up being too frequent for me. The sheep and the sheepdogs, we had a rapport. I felt like I had friends. I had a fire in there. It was comfy. I brought a bunch of books. I was just reading philosophy, and I read all the world religious texts. and would just go out and be with the sheep and the dogs, and it's really easy and beautiful. And I just thought, I'm not really separated enough. So I left the reservation. I figured out my caloric needs for the next 5 or 6 months, and I went to Walmart and bought enough canned food and water to last me, another 5 months or so. I drove that cargo into the desert and deposited it about 40 miles south of Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. And then I hiked in and illegally basically camped on government land. On a plateau, I built a shelter out of mud. I didn't have anything to read or write with. I didn't have a tent or a sleeping bag. I didn't have a flashlight. I never built a fire because I just wanted to have me in existence, period, with no crutches at all. And to confront what boredom is. And I had it really easy because I was relatively safe. I had everything I needed to eat and drink. So it was just really about sitting there and seeing what would happen. It was a curiosity that
So
really
you're just
drove
like
me.
kind of meditating the whole time, or you're just kind of like just taking it all in when you're in these moments?
Well, I don't really know what happens as a woman, but as a man, certain instincts really start kicking in, and you start to realize how much you are actually controlled by very specific, strong instincts that, when we're in this environment, are hard to distinguish. So when I first got out there, I had this massive instinct just to create a shelter, and the first week I just built this thing. Also as a need to feel sort of safe, because when you're sleeping out, whether it's actual dangers or psychological dangers,
right,
you feel vulnerable. So I built my shelter, and then I could just feel myself wanting to shape my environment. As an artist, I would spend months collecting white rocks, and I'd make a white rock riverbed down the plateau. Or I would make ornaments out of resin and hang them all through the trees. And I would use a little knife, and all the lichen on all the boulders, I wouldn't change nature, but I would just clean up nature's choices on all the lichen, so it just became a much cleaner palette of art on these rocks that I also had a
So
partnership
you use this
with.
whole thing as a big kind of canvas, right? As a way to kind of play.
Yeah, I looked at it
just, like,
as an
let it-
artist.
Like, however, you're an artist, but you really let all these experiences really influence you in the most beautiful way possible.
And being alone aids in that.
Yeah.
It does. And then traveling around America was another project where literally people were buying me gas at gas stations. Garages were fixing my car for free. I got into Oklahoma. I spent the night at 140 Walmarts. And when I got into Oklahoma, this lady called me, because my phone number's on my Facebook, and she said, listen, we've been watching what you're doing. We want Oklahoma to be the best state. So she said, we're not going to let you sleep in your van. You tell us where you're going. We're going to get you a hotel, give you gift cards, and send you like gift baskets so that you never have to stay in your van in Oklahoma. And it turned out it was the booster club of a girls' soccer team in their teens. It was actually Garth Brooks' daughter's soccer team. So I got funded all the way around Oklahoma. As I chose where I wanted to go, I just called them up, and everything was taken care of. And I mean, it's amazing. Like,
but let me ask you a question, because so you do this thing first. You're given keys. You go in there, and then you live in the desert. And now you're doing this thing with Good in America.
mm-hmm.
The time between living in the desert and driving around the country, I mean, there had to be this whole kind of like re-immersion into the society, right? Was that kind of a, hey, all of a sudden I'm just back from living in the desert?
Yeah, because it's just like you're sort of teleported back to that
You feel like it
reality.
never happened on some level?
Yeah, it's a dream.
Yeah.
As all memory is, you can't distinguish between a real memory and a dream, really. They're the same material. When you think back on dreams, they feel like the same as a memory. So it becomes a dream almost. And a rancher, basically when I came out of the desert, this rancher picked me up because my car was parked somewhere else. And we just went to this place called Golden Corral, which is like, it's like a cafeteria,
Yeah,
really. And I had a big beard. I was all wearing white, and I just rolled in there with stains all over. I went straight to the chocolate fountain in the back, drank chocolate, and You know, it felt very natural to be back. It's just, you know, you're always, what happened on the road.
Do you remember that moment though, like coming into Golden Corral, like it was like
absolutely
back Golden Corral? That was my first thing I was thinking the whole time.
Yeah. Well, when I was in the desert, I would do things like I called them deprivations. So 1 week I blindfolded myself for a week, because through all these experiences, you have an idea of what you think you're going to learn, but it's never, the insights that come to you are never what you think they are. So across world religious traditions and philosophical traditions, people will do deprivations in order to gain insight or to look at their life from different perspectives. Here in LA right now, people are doing ayahuasca for that same thing. People fast. People will sometimes have some element of discomfort to just force you to look at things differently.
Lean into whatever
yeah.
it is.
So I did a week without sight, I did a week without sound, I did a week without sight and sound, and then I did a week of sleep deprivation.
How'd you know
and fasting and no water. I had a staff and I just marked 7 days. And then I wanted to have a pain element, so I ended up wearing a barbed wire collar around my neck for 100 days. And it's really interesting.
Yeah, I want to come back to that one in a second. But you know, one thing, I mean, all these journeys and things, we have a lot we could really talk about that. But your name is Trek. Obviously, it's pretty fitting. If it was, you know, anything else, you'd be
like
whatever, Miller, whatever it would be. Where does the name come from?
My parents were named John and Mary, and that was the extent of the story. They just wanted kids with different names. But it has allowed me to sort of grow into it. And I think if I have a child, I would probably name him or her something sort of unique, because it was nice not to be Brian number 3 in the 4th grade class.
Sure, and it's definitely fitting for who you are and your experiences. What does travel mean to you?
Well, travel's a couple of things. It's a form of personal expression, really, because you're making choices that in some way reflect an artistic part of yourself, and a courage also for new experience, which is really important. And that's the lessons you learn from traveling you should absolutely apply to the life that you live. It's also about connection, in that not only are you connecting to the experiences, but you're connecting to people around the world. And you're connecting to nature itself, and you're connecting to, you're connecting to the skies, you're connecting to the oceans, you're connecting to the sunsets. And I think it's a very profound realization, especially when you travel alone, especially for me in the desert, was that I wasn't alone at all. Like, people ask if I get lonely, and I just never did, because I didn't feel alone.
I came up with a little saying for myself when I was like traveling by myself, was on my own but not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that whole thing is like, everyone's with you, but you're really kind of by myself, but I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
mm-hmm.
I have that all kind of with me.
Mm-hmm.
Feels that way. So I'm assuming you've had a lot of what I call travel with meaning moments, but do you have either one person who really stands out, or that one experience that you're like, oh yes, this is like a huge cornerstone of all my travels and experiences?
There are so many. I mean, there really are so many, and I try to tell one. I always cry when I tell this, and I'm a terrible actor. But if I ever had to act, and they said, okay, we need you to cry for this scene, I just start telling the story, and I'd start crying. So I'll probably cry at some point during this story. Some varies where I get through it. But one of the things that you realize out there, or at least for me, was I was shocked and humbled and surprised consistently at how kind people are. And you really come to understand that people with the least often give the most. So I was in Haiti, and I'd made the choice, after the earthquake, and I made the choice to stay in the tent cities, and they call us blancs there. All the white people would leave at the end of the day and go to their condos, and then the Haitians would stay in the tents, obviously. And they were very surprised that I wanted to stay with them. And they're like, why don't you just go back to your hotel? I was like, I want to experience what you guys are experiencing. one of the nights I was there was a hurricane that came through, and you know, you can imagine these are little structures that aren't very stable. And this young couple there in their 20s asked me to stay with us. They said, please, do you stay with us tonight? We'll keep you safe. And so I did. The tent was probably just about 2/3 the size of this rug, and maybe a little bit longer. Maybe about the size of this rug this way exactly. Maybe a little smaller. And inside there was a bench, maybe this wide. There's a little tiny curtain right here with a bucket, and the bottom was open, so water just rushed down from the hurricane, and it's windy, just rushed down the bottom of this tent. And they said, okay, well, you're our guest in here, you know, would you want to bathe? And I just said, you know, I'm good. And they said, please, you know, bathe, you know, make use of our facilities. So I got behind the curtain and I washed myself. And then they said, you know, when we were getting ready to go to bed, they said, listen, you're going to sleep on the bed, which is just actually a bench about this wide where they both would sleep normally. And I said, you guys, and this is in broken English because we're just trying to make each other understand each other, but I just said, I can't sleep on this. You know, this is your bed. I'm fine. Tomorrow I can go to a hotel, whatever. I'll just sleep down here in the water. And they said, we're not going to let you sleep down there. And it got into it got into a discussion. They basically said, if we were at your house in America, would you make us sleep on the floor? And I said, no, of course not. You sleep in the bed. And they said, well, and there's your answer. So not only did I sleep on their bed, but they took all the clothes that they owned, and which they don't even do for themselves, and they folded them into a mattress. And I made it this far. They folded them into a mattress on the bench, and I slept in the bed, and they shivered all night in the cold in the water below. But I realized that in the morning that, especially when they came out of the tent, and they felt so proud that they had enough to give, to actually have a guest to their neighbors. They were very proud that they had a guest that stayed with them. I realized how important it is to accept gifts gracefully. If you fight someone too hard on receiving something, you're detracting from the power of the gift that they're trying to give you. And it's a gift in a way to receive gracefully because you're giving back. What you're giving them is respect and hope in a way. And that was certainly a lesson of just the joy that they had the next day of being able to have enough even to give beyond themselves. And it was very humbling, and you know, it's those types of lessons that you see when you're traveling that make you feel so lucky that there's no way for you to not be entirely appreciative of your life. For me at least, I live in my car. I've been living in my car for 6 years, and I have a safe place to sleep. I can go see movies. I shower at the beach or at Gold's Gym. I have all that I need to eat. You know, it made the decision to live in my car a lot easier when you know how the rest of the world lives. And they still laugh and love and raise kids in circumstances we can't imagine. So traveling by context has made me a much, much happier person because I don't have the right not to be.